Hey, welcome to the Broken for Better podcast.
We're a nonprofit organization with the purpose of equipping your marriage and strengthening your family so that your tomorrow can be better than your today.
Enjoy the episode. Welcome back. We are back with the Broken for Better podcast, and we are so excited to have some dear friends of ours, Laila and Dave.
Let's go.
That's right. We have Laila and Dave. We're going to be talking about blending families and balancing that. And how do you balance it? I know you guys have an amazing story, amazing testimony of how you met, just amazing, amazing journey. And so we know your story.
I sort of put them together, kind of.
Kind of?
I mean,
Did
we'll
he?
get there, but I think
Okay.
I was the matchmaker. I mean, sort of. I don't know.
Maybe you see this. This is what this is. Toot, toot. That's called tooting your horn. Okay. But since we know your story, and maybe those that are watching don't, do y'all feel free to just share a little bit about your story? Give us the ins, the outs, how you met. Yeah, who you were before you got together.
Well, it's really interesting because I'm third generation blended family.
Really?
So my grandparents, and for those who have island families, it's not really uncommon that you'll have husband and wife, and then husband has kind of one here and one there and one over there. And so my mom is one of about 10.
Wow.
7 are from my maternal grandmother and grandfather, and then others from my grandfather. And then my mom actually was my biological father's second wife. So they already had 2 kids, my father and his first wife. And then when my dad got remarried, we had 2 more, which is my sister and I. So it really wasn't a far-fetched concept to think that I'd end up in a blended family. But at the same time, I definitely approached it much, much different than I did my first marriage. To say the
Okay, so we're going to get to that.
Yeah, because I have to pull more on that for sure. I want to know.
Sure. Wow. So,
Wow.
okay, Dave, before I get that, I want to, so generationally, is that, and I'm going to dive right into this thing because now I'm in. I didn't
Yeah.
know this part of your story.
Yeah.
So is that almost like a generational thing that you two are like having to break off your children that doesn't carry on?
So for me personally, one thing that I refused to allow to be the same for our children's story was I believed lies in my first marriage. And I got married because I said, I don't want to end up like some of my other family members and the things that they walked through and all the divorce. And I saw that in my prior generation. And I said, okay, well, you know what? It doesn't matter what's happening. This thing has to work because I'm not going to be this statistic. And not statistically like, oh, I read a bunch of research and found stats, but just in my own family, almost all of my aunts had been divorced. So for me, I was thinking, yeah, I'm not doing that. So there were things that I knew weren't okay, went against my faith, my belief, my core. But I was like, divorce is not an option. We're not doing that. It's not happening again. And it ended up still happening, not by my original choosing, but it was really one of the greatest things that probably ever happened. Yeah. Because when we read in scripture that God says he uses all things for good, he literally used it for good. And it completely changed my mindset. It changed how I viewed marriage. It changed how I said, Lord, I know one day you'll have me married again. But as for now, I just need you to give me tunnel vision. I want to know and see only you, Jesus, and my kids. Yeah. And I would go out places and I have friends and family that would laugh. Did you see that guy trying to talk to you? What guy? But I literally, I was just like, I need to have a moment in a season to re-understand and relearn what does this even look like? What does it mean? Because after the previous 2 generations and all the mess that I've seen, I said it has to be different for the next generation because I have to give them a better version of what it's supposed to look like, which was wisdom that someone kind of shared with me.
Well, it's so important that you say that because I think there's so many times we can hold on to those decisions, right, that we've seen happen in the past. You can hold on to those things like, okay, this will not happen to me. This is whatever. So then we end up just totally allowing all of these things to transpire. And before you know it, you're actually holding on to the very things that's going to hurt you more than the thing you're so scared to let go of. And so, yeah, wow, that's really, really powerful.
Yeah, that's
'Cause-
crazy. I did not like that. That's a very interesting piece that I had no idea. So, all right.
Yeah.
Let's we got to go back to figure out who they are.
Okay,
We don't
sorry.
even know. I mean, we're like deep into this thing. now.
Sorry.
All right, Dave, bring us up to speed, man. Tell us a little bit.
Well, I too came out of a divorced family. Dad left out really early, so I think in my generation was like the first generation where people that are trying to get their lives on track and want to assemble some kind of normal, break the societal curse that's beginning. You know, I didn't want to be anything like my dad. You know, I seen my grandparents live in a dysfunctional environment. They stayed together, but they had separate rooms they stayed in. And I remember when my grandfather built a separate master bedroom suite that he could stay in the house. And
Wow.
you know, he did everything. You know, he was always kind to my grandmother, took care of her. But you know, that's how it started for us. And in our family, my dad left out at an early age. So when I started considering marriage, I was probably, you know, maybe late 20s. I finally got married the first time when I was 30. So I intended that marriage to be the first and last. I was, you know, I'd been serving the Lord for about 2 or 3 years, and you know, this is just the Christian way to do things. You know, you get married once and you stay with her and you make sure she's the right one. But none of that happened. I mean, same thing. We got counsel from the pastors. We had chaperones every time we hung around each other. We did everything by the book, you know, that you would think it's, you know, safe for two young Christians to stay out of trouble until they got married. I think the really odd thing was we knew each other for about a year and a half, but when I decided that's the lady I wanted to marry, 5 weeks later I was married, and it happened fast. You know, we didn't believe it was a real good. Our church as a whole didn't believe it was a good to wait a long time. You know, and practically it didn't make sense to them, and so we did. But it didn't last that long. You know, we never really were one. We never became one. It was it was the immaturity. It was a number of things along those lines that really caused us to fall away from each other and not ever see eye to eye. So yeah, that's kind of how I started out. You know, I was young in the faith, got married. I thought I was ready. I was more high-minded than I was ready. And I failed miserable. I failed really miserable. And we did. I mean, it wasn't my fault.
It's a two-person thing.
Just two people. We were just, it didn't work.
So for you, was it that thought of like, okay, tunnel vision as well, or did you know like, no, I like this. I want to be married, but I just didn't see it right. I don't like. I got to do this all differently, or what?
Well, differently. I didn't know what that really meant. And so I got some counsel, and it was from people who were very, very, I wouldn't say Puritans, but they were very conservative, and which is, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, they kept it in the Bible. It wasn't like out of the Bible type purity, but it was good. But I think there was a lot of naivety to it, and we really weren't prepared, and we didn't. You know, one thing I think was a big thing that I really want to emphasize is we didn't bring things to the light, the things we were struggling with.
Wow.
We didn't have marriage podcasts to watch or seminars or, we had pastors and people to talk to, but we don't even know what the right questions were to ask, you know? And so it was a lack of education. We were just like, she would, deal with the insecurities, and I would be angry, and I would deal with anger, and there would be all kinds of things flying around, and not physically, but just, emotions.
Like, but sometimes there are some
every now and then, every man throws a good a cup across the room, or something. But I'm joking, but we were just ill-equipped. Yeah. Ill-equipped.
I like how you use the phrase, I was too high-minded to be ready. Yeah. And I think that sacrifice, that humility is so needed in our relationships. And when we aren't ready for marriage, I think a lot of us don't realize how much marriage can be a sacrifice.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and even today when we do premarital for young couples, getting into something you've never done before, and many of the topics you're not really interested in asking the questions. So for a lot of them, intimacy isn't a thing. Well, now I'm going to talk to you about intimacy. I don't know what to do with that. How do I ask you questions about intimacy? Well, then you don't ask, and you go into a relationship, and now one of the biggest reasons of divorce is lack of intimacy. And it's kind of like I was telling my sons when they got younger, I was like, it's funny to me that you'll ask me how to change a tire, how to ride a bike, how to sign a check, how to get a job, do a resume. You'll ask me all these things that benefit you, but you won't ask me the one thing that you have to die to you to serve someone else.
Yeah.
You don't ask me the questions on how do I do this right when now I have to live selflessly. And even to this day, we don't ask. So in the premarital, we forced these topics out of people. Okay, so let's talk about sex. And it's like, what? Can you say that? I don't know if you can say that. And you realize one of them, wants to hang from chandeliers, and one of them wants to do it with the lights off. And it's like, well, how do these two worlds merge now? You know what I mean? So very, very interesting. Speaking of worlds merging, you have tunnel vision. You're getting out of this thing. How did this happen?
He was very, very persistent.
He broke through the tunnel. He's like, tunnel vision. I got your tunnel.
I literally remember thinking one time, he's everywhere. Like, I swear I just saw him there, and now who is this guy? He seems to be everywhere.
Butler on Mr. Deeds, turn around. No!
Literally. I remember vividly thinking he's everywhere, like all the time. He's everywhere. He would just pop up. Like, oh, hey, how are you? Hi. Like, oh, hey, your friend gave me your number to do, I'm going out of town maybe, and I need someone to babysit my dog. I said, no friend of mine gave you that number. I don't do pets. Like, how did this happen? And it's like, oh, well, I also need my taxes done. I'm like, wow, he has a lot of needs now. Like, this guy.
They were once. They were once.
Everywhere.
Oh, the once.
Extremely needy.
It's like,
Match made
but
in
really,
heaven.
none of those things ever got done. But somehow there was always another reason for a conversation that eventually led to, oh, you need help moving? Sure.
Wow.
Single mother needs help moving.
Found something.
He's like, aha. Discovered something I can stumble on. He's like, but you can't move boxes on an empty stomach, so let me take you to breakfast. Like, well, I guess that
This
kind of
dude,
makes
he
sense.
knew what time it was.
And I'm literally thinking to myself, I'm like, well, I guess that kind of makes sense. That's a lot of moving to do. Okay.
His name is
And
Armstrong.
there it started.
My name is Armstrong.
My name is too now. It's
Not
Armstrong.
strong arm, but Armstrong. Yeah. So you have tunnel vision. You're like, only Jesus. Like, I wasn't even going to let my first marriage end because you were going to just dig your heels in no matter what you had to encounter. Then you're like, okay, now it's just me and Jesus. Like, that's where we
and the
are.
boys.
And the boys,
And the boys.
of course. But here I am. Like, how was that hard for you to even let someone pass that shell or like pass that boundary? Like, I would think that would be so difficult.
It didn't take that long.
Well, first of all, we met in like April. But he said he'd been trying to figure out how to meet me for months before that. And someone, actually Mr. Leon, I went mulching with to serve at our church, the next day introduced me to him. I was like, oh, this is my friend.
I still owe him $20 for that.
It was a setup. No way, I don't believe it. But from that point, it still took about 3 months before we actually went out to eat. And then it took another about 2 more months before we went out to eat a second time. So he just kept trying and kept trying. And then finally we were the third time eating. And I'm like, oh my, like this is going for a long time. I think this might qualify as a date. And there it began. Then someone let him in my office at work a few days later to
That was
drop
me.
off flowers.
I did
That
that.
I owe you
And
20 also.
I owe you 20.
I'm gonna be broke by the time I leave here.
Hey, you were right. He just kept popping up everywhere. I'm like, who are you? You want in her office? Oh, I'll give you that. In her office.
let him.
Seems like a nice guy.
He had ice
my
cream. I
goodness.
thought it was for me. I'm an ice cream guy. I'm like, I'll take that. He's like, no, it's not. Big thing of roses. I mean, it was a whole deal.
Wow.
Yeah, real deal. Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, that's why I feel like, without me, I don't know that they would have been able to make
Oh,
it.
okay.
Well, at least Leon, It only cost me $40.
So it's tiered.
Yeah.
So let's do this. Obviously, with two marriages that you saw not go the way you desired, and here you are now getting past the dates, realizing, okay, this is a thing. What were those like initial conversations or parameters or boundaries? Because I almost feel like, and I remember you during those days, having gone through the ending of the first one, having the boys and just being dedicated to I'm a mom, like I'm gonna raise my boys to love Jesus, and and then meeting Dave, coming from up north and finding out who you were, but it's like I feel like there would have been some real boundaries or parameters or some hard conversations, almost conversations like I don't know that anyone can meet that criteria. Even Dave, like you for Laila, was there things going? Okay, I'm so gonna make sure that this person has these things this time so that we go a different track record than what we had been in the past.
Yeah, I'll start with that one. I remember, I think my first time I noticed Laila, and I'm going to be vulnerable and humble here, and I'm going to admit that it was a physical thing. I actually, forgive me, Lord, but I looked at her from behind in church, and I was like...
He's like, I didn't even see her face.
No, well, again, no, I kind of did. She walked by. She had Austin and Dominic. They were they had these little afros, and they were walking by, and I was like, hey, kind of like in between songs, and so that was the first time, and then Leon,
forgive me, Lord. The Lord's like, I gave that to her.
Yeah, I gave that to her, and I gave you your eyes too, yeah. But initially, it was a physical appearance,
Yeah.
And so and she had two amazingly cute little boys that were following around with little 17-inch afros, and they were, so I watched for a few days, and then we got introduced by Leon, but the key to me growing up in a very high, energetic church of just pouring themselves into people. She was going around the church hugging everybody, and just what a big smile on her face, and and she was really the only one that really did that. And in the environment that where I sat in Life Church, she was the only one that did that. And I was like, wow, that's she loves people. She loves fellowshipping, and she's just going from one to the other, fellowshipping and hugging, and that was attractive. Just seeing that. So I think that's one of the things that had me take that next, efforts to start paying people to set us up and things like that.
That's
College
hysterical.
tuition's going down the drain.
Hey, so I asked, were there boundaries you put on each other? And you're like, all I did was see her from behind. So I don't know if your boundaries were very little.
Right. No, they were.
He's like, not many. There were many.
I answered something else there. I think it was just leading up to that. But yeah, the boundaries were
You
the
just
word
saw
of God.
loving people.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
saw 11 people, but that was the attraction. But the boundaries were we love the word of God, and I was not the same man I was, when I divorced.
Yeah.
I guess it would have been 13 years before that, and I went that long celibate and single,
Wow.
the majority of it, and that's another whole story. But yeah, just wanting to be married and looking for that opportunity at every turn, at some point in my life. But
So I think but by the grace of God, I'm not in this situation, but by God's grace, I think it would be easier for a man, for us, boundaries, potentially, just to have that relationship and companion again. Was it that easy for you, or was it much harder?
Much harder for me.
Yeah.
Much, much harder. I mean, there was a boundary there that I didn't even know that he existed for months. He was constantly trying to say hi. I look back in hindsight and I realized, oh, he was trying to get my attention. But at the moment, it was like, oh, just another person at church. Hi, keep going. Give a hug. Hi, keep going. I was completely oblivious of any interest whatsoever that he had. And it took months before I even realized that there was an interest there. And then even after I discovered the interest, it was, okay, well, we can text. I could talk to him outside of the boys not being around. He wasn't over. We didn't go out together with the kids for months. It was really a lot of us getting to know each other on the phone. I mean, hours and
Very
hours.
clandestine. Many people in church didn't know that we were even a
Oh,
thing
yeah.
for probably well over a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really low key. You know, careful. I think it was careful.
Careful. I
Yeah.
think that's a great,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because
I mean, because you're putting, I'm just thinking about like the stat that you have on blended families.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think careful's so important too, because you both have children, beautiful children, obviously, but beautiful children that you love, and so it's not just your hearts that are going to be intertwined, right? And yeah, one of the stats out there, Forbes, says that out of the I think over 1,300 families that they interviewed, more than 75% of them said that they didn't feel ready for their second marriage, which is a staggering fact. It's a staggering fact, and I don't know who they interviewed. Right.
I mean, the hard thing about that is I knew, because I remember coming out of my first court appearance, literally about 2 months before meeting him, and everything that I cried out to the Lord, when I met him, he met all of those things.
Wow.
But at that time, I wasn't in any mental space to even put those pieces together.
Right.
Because all I was thinking was, I want tunnel vision.
Right.
One day you'll get me married. I don't think you're going to make me, have a life of,
Yeah.
spouse-free living. But,
Yeah.
Lord, I'm not even ready. Like, I confessed, I'm not ready for that. I learned so much of what I did wrong. I learned so much of what I shouldn't have allowed. I learned so much of, because I didn't want to end up like some of the stats in my family, I'll keep letting this happen. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So there were so many ideologies and, hills that I died on that I had to break down all those walls before I even considered entertaining the idea of dating someone, let alone getting remarried. And because I was blessed enough to be a part of a community of single women, I also, just in my nature, I'm a researcher. So I researched and I watched all the things happening with ladies like, oh, I'm going to go date again. And just the ups and downs and the crashes emotionally and the children. And I'm like, I don't want any of that going on, And so for us, it was almost like a casual interrogation, almost, because we would literally
like
spend
that.
3 and 4 hours on the phone. And we would say, well, tell me something you've never told someone else. And I'm like, oh, we're doing this. Okay. And I'd share something and then he'd share something. And I'm like, maybe he shouldn't have told me that. Okay. But an hour later, we're still on the phone. Keep going. Okay.
Wow.
And I mean, literally for
Now it's
months
I
and
gotta get up-
months.
I got to get up for work in 3 hours. We got to hang up now. Yeah.
Do you feel
love that.
do you feel like, and we could run down this trail in a minute, but do you feel like you were well equipped when you had resources on the blended family? Do you feel like in your scenario there was enough out there, or
I didn't. But I have a lot of experience training children in the sense overseeing families in my old church environment. Well over 20 years I spent counseling families with children, not necessarily blended, but just with children. And I didn't even think of the term blended family. I just knew that I could raise children if I had to raise children. In my old church, I was Uncle Dave. I was the guy that not only will that young lady before she marries, before she goes and talks to her dad about this guy, she's coming to let me filter him first. I was that close with kids, so I really didn't feel like blended family was even a term to be said. I just felt comfortable with other people's kids, I guess you could say, and so I didn't even think about it necessarily. And then, of course, we'll probably talk a little bit more about how well our kids got along. And I mean, immediately,
Oh, yeah,
they were
we're
just
gonna
like
get there.
three
Yeah, we're
peas
gonna
in a
get there.
pod.
Yeah.
It was like they were all natural brothers,
Yeah.
and they still act that way. And there's, so I think they made it a lot easier. So
what was a non-negotiable? Like, if we're gonna do this, this is a non-negotiable.
Oh, see, I had the non-negotiable conversation in my car with the Lord before even he came around. And the non-negotiable was, I will not remarry someone who doesn't love you.
Yeah.
Like I learned the first time, I was literally walking down the aisle holding my dad's hand, and he says, Laila, are you sure? He doesn't even serve the Lord. I'm like, it's going to be fine, Dad, it's going to be fine. And I remember saying,
Wow.
Lord, just fix him.
Oh,
Wow.
As I'm walking the aisle. So when I was coming from my first court appearance from that same relationship, I was like, okay, so we're going to do things a little differently, Jesus. I promise he'll love you. I won't even talk to him if he doesn't love you.
wow.
A man after your own heart, David. And I just kind of rattled off, not just from the failed marriage, but also from a life of being blended. Stories I heard, I mean,
True.
I watch things that I'm the baby of 4, but I have older brothers where in their 30s came crying to my mom and apologizing, asking for forgiveness for things that they believed as children that they did to be spiteful because this is what their mom said versus their bio mom versus their stepmom. And,
Wow.
just all the mess that comes along with that. So when I prayed, I was praying from I don't want to deal with that, Jesus, please. And please don't let me have to deal with that. And can we make sure that if I do that? So, I mean, my prayer was, in a sense, innocent to where, like, I just want a beautiful thing to happen one day in the future.
Yeah.
But it was also with experience of I've seen firsthand how some of these things have happened. Lord, we have enough issues to deal with. Please don't let that be a part of the equation.
Yeah.
And thankfully, when Dave and I started talking through things, we were dating as just two people dating. It wasn't even here's the blended label.
Right.
But I had a filter of how will that look to my boys one day, and how would that look, and I love that about him, and I like that about him, and I can agree on that with him. And
Yeah.
okay. And so we were doing this interview, but it was really just, we want to make sure that we don't do this again.
Right.
Not just for our sakes, but also for the 3 that are going to watch us.
Yeah.
And for me, as a mom, I knew that I couldn't teach them all the things because I'm not a man. So I wanted to make sure, Lord, please let it be a man that loves you, because if he loves you, then all the other things that he needs to know is going to come with that, and they're going to be able to see that.
Yeah, that is solid. Yeah, that's a foundational truth.
It sounds like you did a lot of healing on your own when it came to not only like both of you, when it came to your first marriage, but also some of the things that you had encountered as children, right? Because you both come from blended families, or what you would call dysfunction. We all have dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
We all have trauma. But you have 2 options when faced with that, right? You either duplicate it, or you get bitter from it and cause more dysfunction or more hurt. Or you say, okay, I'm going to heal from it, and I'm going to change the next generation, or I'm going to breathe life. And it sounds like, and obviously we know you, but it sounds like you did so much healing before that was ever even an option, to where you're able to encourage your boys to have strong relationship no matter what the dynamic looks like, with their other parent as well.
But I think the truth to that foundationally is when you, for many, that second divorce rate percentage is between the 60 and 70, and thirds is 70 to 85% of divorces. And I think so many times when something doesn't work, we run to what we think will work, and that's another person. Both of y'all have made it evidently clear that in your situations, the first thing you did was went to the Lord, and it's like, work on me, and then I can be. And I think that's a truth. Married, not married, about to get married, about to get divorced. The first thing that has to happen is you and the Lord got to do work.
Yeah.
I mean, let him heal you so that then you can go be the best version of you for someone else. Someone else doesn't complete you. Well, I guess on Jerry Maguire.
Yeah, but I don't know how theologically correct that. I don't think
They don't
Jerry
complete
1.4
you. But if we look to people, substance, work,
right,
there's a plethora of things we turn to. It's just so many times in relationships we go to other people because they make us tangibly feel good in that second. And I think it's just so commendable. And you see the success story, you see what your boys are doing, and you go, oh, so there is a system that works. You've just got to be willing to work the system.
Well, some of the evidence of the parameters or the boundaries that we set, it wasn't. Laila had made a book for me for I think it was Christmas, right? Yeah, and it was the book was a compilation of all of our text messages for the first 6 months or a year,
6 months.
around 6 months, our conversations. She wrote every little grunt, every little everything down and in sequence by date. And I got thumbing through this thing and I said, man, that's some good stuff. That's some good, when I say that, not that the material, but just
Right.
how it was pure.
Yeah.
We just fellowshipped around God's word mostly. And yeah, there was some weird stuff in there, awkwardness and things like that. But generally it was edifying. I was reading this book and getting built up, It's like, oh, this is some good stuff. We're just talking about God's word and, flipping through verses and that's how time would just go by. And I think, we could attribute a lot of our healing, and I'm not going to just say she was the one that needed healing, because when you feel like you're going to get ready to, when you feel like the reality of a relationship is right there within your grasp, all of a sudden all these things start coming up that you're wondering, man, I didn't know that was still there. That little feeling, that emotion, that kind of thing.
Wow.
So that kind of stuff starts pulling, when you realize, a guy can show, other, maybe along the way, I might have shown interest in a couple other ladies before I met her. And without the reality of her talking back to you, those things aren't going to come up. But because you have the pressure of, wow, this could happen. Now It's like, okay, now whether it's your body's defense mechanisms or old wounds or whatever it is, it's going to start, coming back up. Now I got to start dealing with those, and so, but I think, and I said that to go along with her healing process, we fellowshipped around God's word so much that I think a lot of the washing came from that edification, that taking time talking about God and his word and experiences in the church and, her experiences and back and forth. And it was just so edifying. And therefore the original attraction is now, wow, she's a godly woman and she's beautiful. My famous saying is,
We know, Dave. You already told us she's beautiful. We got that at the beginning. We know.
No, listen to this saying.
He's like, oh, I saw you. And I'm like, wow, she's beautiful. And she's pretty too. And I was like, what? He was like, well, I was standing from behind. So I was like, oh, wow, honey. Now here I am.
All I can see is Dave walking through the church aisles going, Lord, let her front match her back. Let her front match her back.
Oh my
So fun. Okay, so love the way you guys have centered it and the way you're so open. And knowing both of y'all, I mean, your love for Christ is crazy and you love each other that much, but you love him first.
I'm sorry. I got to cut you off if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Just going to insert this one thing because you started touching on it. One of the things that I think has made our relationship as a blended family so successful is that we were willing to deal with our baggage individually before trying to just mush our baggage together.
Yeah.
And for blended families, it's easy to look at the kids and say, oh, that's the baggage you bring. But the kids really aren't the baggage. The baggage is in here. They're just the natural, physical, visual that you say, oh, this person has 3 kids, that one has 2 kids. That's the baggage they brought to the marriage.
Wow.
No, the baggage really is in our hearts. And we took time not only to work on our individual baggage with the Lord, but then when we got together, we started identifying some things in each other. And it was like, well, such and such, and well, I didn't think that well. So we started evaluating some of those things. So the baggage in our hearts were really the biggest issue that we had to work through. Our kids were just easy to put in the middle once we had all those things worked out.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I love that so much because knowing your boys and having, served your little boys, in kids' church and everything, and watching them walk through that along with you, they were so filled with joy and all of those things. But the reason why I love it is because kids are never baggage.
They're not baggage. No,
Kids are never an issue. And it's not your baggage and my baggage. I think it's so beautiful to say these are little souls that God has given me the opportunity to steward, and making sure that you worked on you so well that when you present another beautiful soul, it's someone else that's going to empower them and instruct them and encourage them and not harm them in any way. And it's so beautiful.
I literally had a conversation tonight with our oldest, and I told him, I said, when I chose to marry your mom, I wasn't just marrying your mom.
Yeah.
You guys were part of the decision, and again, I said, and so we're let him know the commitment that I had to him and his brother, and along with my natural son, and so there's not a difference there. I know we don't perfectly love each child the same. I mean, I'm sure there's some degrees of, I favor my natural kids over my my other children, but we're making the effort,
Right.
to make it transparently seamless. I'm going to love that one the same way I love my own natural child, and treat them the best we can, and let God perfect that, because
you that's something. The kids, the whole thing, and your kids were actually younger. Now we've met blended families. We've met blended families where kids are older.
Yeah.
Much more difficult, right? There's more attachment and allegiance to a parent, but it's something that we've actually talked about this in previous pods, how you can have the same children under the same roof, raised by the same parents, completely different personalities, and you love them equally because their personalities are different.
Mm-hmm.
You just made that statement. It was interesting. Like, you have your natural kids, and then you would have those that were brought into the marriage. Surely, like, I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it the same way that you find a love for them because of who they are and their personalities and what they offer? Yes, not a natural child, but you learn to, or is love hard for a child that's not yours? Is it hard to go, okay, now I love your mom, but I've got, like, this is a very vulnerable thing. And for y'all, it'll be easy. Y'all have great children, but just in the world that you're in, can that be something? And if so, how does one go about going, okay, I love your mom, I've got to learn to love you. You're about to be my child, essentially.
Yeah, both and.
I've got to learn to how do I do this? And you're crazier than my kid, and I don't know that I like that. Like, that's an interesting thing, Well, one, I know, boy, he'll debate. Like, he'll get in it with you, And I would think, for me, I'd be like, hey, shut up, kid. Like, I'm, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to have this. But that's the thing that's a real thing, because you could begin to get resentful, bitter. I mean, there's a lot of emotions that come in that. So how do you find that ability? Is it God given, or is it you learn to love what you learn to love?
For me, I would say I prayed specifically that the Lord would help me to love our little Jonathan as if I carried him. Love him like he was in my womb, God. And it's been easier, facts, it's been easier to love him than to discipline him. So I had the exact opposite problem for what you described.
Wow.
Loving him, not a problem. He's sweet, he's cuddly, all these things. Like, oh yes, Jonathan, this is great. Fantastic. When it came to discipline, Dave and I didn't always agree on the same things as far as correction's concerned.
Yeah.
And one thing I never thought would be so hard after listening to hours and hours and hours of blended type of podcasts, I had to do my research before we got married. This is who I am. I got to be ready. And I just wasn't ready for the fact that I would hear correction happening in the other room. And if it was my natural children, I would react differently than if it was my bonus son. And it was like, oh, but that's not okay, Laila. Like, it should be the same across the board. I'm like, Lord, help me with that. Or even when it came time for me to correct, it was like, oh, I have no problem correcting my natural sons, but my bonus son, I would say, well, would Dave get offended if I said that? Would he agree with that? Wow. Yeah. So that's been, more of a hurdle to get over than loving.
Yeah.
It was really easy to love him no different than any. I mean, I was watching him when Dave had to work late or he had to work on a Saturday. You know, he'd come over and I'd have him even when the other two weren't home because of the schedules. No big deal whatsoever.
Yeah.
The correction was probably the harder part. And then sometimes I'd sit there and the Lord would show me, well, you could have two people that came from two different backgrounds and they have kids together and they still won't agree on what, is supposed to be acceptable
Looking
correction.
at two of them. Are you? we were totally
100%,
different.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And I asked a very tough question to y'all because honestly, like your boys are so easy to love. Like
They really are.
polite, kind, love. I mean, John, he's like a little teddy bear. You know, it's like it's easy. So I could
All three are.
totally see that at all. And I wouldn't even have thought that this one, but yeah, you're right. What a very interesting thing. You know, it's just a lot of things that we don't think about that people that walk in your shoes, and that's why we're doing this, just to kind of go, man, let somebody who's either about to enter that season or is in that season, let them know that there's other people out there that, hey, we're navigating the same thing, and it's just the way we did it.
Yeah.
And that's not something we even talked about. Because, I mean, we talk about the big things. Oh, yeah, our kids shouldn't be lying. Yes, we know that.
That's a major discipline.
Yeah.
That's spanking material there. You know?
But when you think about, just little things you grow up with, there are some people that I hear come from the school of thought of, oh, I had to eat everything that was placed in front of me. And then you have the other school of thought of, oh, if you felt like it, you ate it. If you did it, no big deal. Little things.
Yeah.
Who stops,
Can.
Yeah. Who stops to think about those little areas that it's like, no, this is how we've always done it. And he's like,
That's
So
probably
now we got to have
good,
all the sidebar conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so, are we on the same team or what? Because, we can't get
Hey,
in front
and
of
Dave's
them.
like, Lila,
Same
you're
team,
feeding
different
him
play,
nuts and
right?
berries. Give the kid a burger and cookies. He'll eat it, I promise you.
Right.
Really? That's where we went with that?
He knows Jonathan, I guess. But,
No, I know Lila.
yeah, I know a lot of it. I think we were opposite there in the sense of I had no problem at all correcting her children. Her natural children were a little bit different in personality than Jonathan.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan never didn't, from in my perspective, never required a whole lot of discipline and instruction. Yeah, he was a little aloof and get into mischief like any other kid, but I felt like these ones needed it a little worse than that one. I had it easier. I had no problem correcting her boys, and she was a little more ginger about doing it, but I had no problem at all. And loving the boys. When I say loving them, I believe in the pure biblical sense of love. I've done well at loving the children by laying my life down for them and serving them and teaching them the Word of God. But the emotions and they are with me in a sense, but the whole cuddly and that hasn't gelled yet, and it's still still something that's we're working through. But I love them. I'll tell them I love them, but it's I think we're a little bit different place there.
Yeah.
And I think we both have different. Again, we come from different things, and we're.
Well, mine's
still
25
working
and he
through
doesn't
things.
like being hugged either.
Who's that?
Mine's 25 and he doesn't like
Right.
hugs either. I'm
He
still.
likes it in a different. He likes to.
Yeah,
still trying to
Jonathan,
work
he
likes to
run right up
roughhouse.
in there and get his hug too.
Okay, so the discipline I would have never like. That's a thing that's very interesting. When you look back on it for you two, outside of that one, is there like another hurdle that you went? Honestly, as many hour-long conversations and all the dating and all the boundaries, this was another one that really caught us off guard, like a left hook of, oh wow, we gotta work through this. Did y'all have like one of those that you didn't foresee outside of discipline?
I don't think so. I mean,
Really?
there were a lot of little things, but they weren't major hurdles.
Yeah.
I think at this point, we're a little bit over 3 years married and a little bit over 7 years dating and marriage together. Since we got married, the oneness has grown
Amen.
to a degree where we're a team, and we're going to tackle whatever comes our way. We like to talk. You probably don't notice that, but we're going to come clean with that. We like
Thanks, we
to
were
talk,
curious.
and we never let things go. And I mean, we just deal with it, And I think that's a big thing. We just bring it out, throw it on the table. I'm pretty raw when it comes to just saying what's on my mind, and she's still getting used to that, but I still am that way. And I don't want it. When I get into an argument, I'm like, let's deal with it. I don't have time for you to go think about it. Let's just deal with it. Get it out the way. Let's move on. When we were kids, we drag a guy out of the bar, beat him up, and then put him back on the stool and buy him a beer.
Hey, when he was kids.
That was one of the things he shared with her on one of the first conversations.
When he was kids, he was dragging guys out of the bar and then going and having a beer.
Yeah.
They did it different in your hometown, huh, Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah, he says, yeah.
Yeah. So, so I like to get things out, get it over with, and then let's move on. It's like, now we can relax again, And,
I would say that there are a few things that were really, really critical. And I know you're going to remember this as soon as I say it. For me, with all those hours of research and just preparing, I mean, I was searching the scriptures and I'm looking at, okay, there's a blended families all up and through this thing. This man had how many wives?
Yeah.
It was always an ongoing situation.
Right.
I'm like, people have put a new title on it, but it's not a new concept. It's been happening since the beginning of time.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, so there has to be a way for this to be more successful than the statistics say.
Correct.
It just has to be.
Yeah.
And so as I just started taking bite-sized chunks out of all these varying resources, I would just start putting little things into practice. And even Dave, I told him, I said, one day somebody called Dominic probably might have been like 7 at the time, and he's the oldest, little man. And I was like, little who? Oh, no, you can't call him that. And
knowing that boy, he'll step into that
I know
title.
exactly who called him that.
Yeah.
I know who called him
I'm not going to call anybody out. But someone said,
I know who called him that.
somebody said, hey, little man. I said, no, there are no men in my house. When God puts a man in my house, there will be one.
I like it.
But it was so intentional because I had seen movies and heard comments about, oh, now you're the man of the house. Your dad is gone and you're the man of the house.
Wow.
And there's this false pressure and this false label of telling this young boy that because he's the only testosterone, that he's the man. Testosterone doesn't make you the man yet. You have a ways to go. And I didn't want there to be this conflict of, oh, wait, now mom got married and there's a real man in the house. And my son is saying, no, but I've been told that I was the man. You can't be the man. No.
Yeah.
There will be one man one day. One day you'll grow up to be a man. But at this moment, there aren't any men in mommy's house. And I was very, very blatant with the boys. They didn't understand why I was saying it because they didn't know we were dating yet when I told them that. But I was really intentional because I wanted them not to have these seeds planted in their minds, for them to sit up at night thinking, well, we used to do this and now there's some guy here who's taking my position.
Right.
Or, even at the time, single mom, I had an apartment, my sister moved out, and when we started getting closer to that time, I was like, okay, so here's your room, boys. You have to knock when you come to mommy's room. Don't just come in. All those little things, it was just being intentional because one day I would be married. If my husband and I are in the room, you don't walk in because, well, we've always just walked in mommy's room. No, you don't. So those are practical, simple things that
Very practical.
people take for granted. And then all of a sudden there's these secret wars happening in the house. And no one's really talking about why there's a war, but this boy feels like this guy's taking my title and, this man is taking my mommy and,
Okay, well, can we just, we're 6 or 7 years removed from that, but can we just clear the air? I was simply saying, what up, little man?
You were one of many. You were one of many.
But I love it. I love the protection and the boundaries because it's not only is it so beautiful for the man that God had for you one day, it's so beautiful for them to understand that I put so much emphasis on who God's creating you to be that I'm going to protect it. And it doesn't let them see that they're not validated and that you're out just looking for another man to fill it. No. I'm not looking for anything, but I need you to stay in your lane. Remember who God created you to be, because if and when God does bring someone else, there's going to be very definitive roles that God has in place. And gosh, kudos to y'all. That's so well done. It's such a concept you don't hear,
I'm probably just more, and again, I'm knowing y'all for years and having so many of these kind of conversations. I think I'm probably more just blown away today at the strategic plan that you operated in before doing what you did. And loving Jesus, fixing yourself, protecting your boys and what their titles are, learn how to, I mean, it's just so many things that you go, oh yeah, I could see why that number is 60 to 70% fail a second time. Because if you don't put in the work that y'all put in, all of these things are little cockroaches that are in your relationship. And too many of them create a bad problem. Yeah, cockroaches. How about that?
I know that was okay.
You just went there.
I don't like cockroaches
At all. Yes. Oh.
That's the word. That's the greatest name for them. Little cockroaches.
Talking about the time, we dated 3.5 years, and I think initially she felt that was too long, a little bit, maybe 3 years too long. I don't know, but it was totally intentional for me the same way. I knew by this point in my walk with the Lord, I knew the kind of woman that would be suitable for me. Not just because she has the title woman that is she suitable, but again, hours of counsel and really years of falling short of looking for that counsel, the woman that my pastor would say, Dave, this is your personality. You need a woman like this. You need a woman that's going to push back a little bit, a little stronger.
Nailed it.
Yeah, nailed it. Yeah, somebody that's that's going to be on an intellectual level to where I can have that I can't tell you the 1 day conversations in the past trying to get to know people with the intent to find a wife that just went one and done. Like, okay, I can't stay in a room with that person for more than 2 hours, because of the compatibility wasn't there.
Right.
And I'm not saying that I'm really smart, but you got to be compatible intellectually too. You got to be able to have a conversation, and not just sit on the phone and breathe into each other. You got to actually have
Breathe into each other.
yeah, have some conversations. And so, but I remember I said we need a lot of time to see each other go through some things. We were only seeing each other on weekends, and every now and then we talked a good bit, but actually being around each other, it was very limited. I felt like it was a fair amount of time to where I could see how she handles situations and the pressure she's under, and she can see me. It wasn't just me trying to check her out. She deserves an opportunity to see me in action.
Right, absolutely.
And go through some things and have some life experiences and see how we do in it. And I think that was I think it should be done the first time, but especially getting married again, we both made mistakes, and I used to have a saying, and it was totally false, but I used to say, if I just don't do what I used to do, I'll be a better husband. And that was kind of sarcastic, facetious, but not too far from true. I did some dumb things and said some things that shouldn't have been said. You don't say that. You don't tell her she looks fat in a dress. Whatever. You don't say certain things. There's certain things you don't do. Yeah, you do it once. Yeah.
Lesson learned.
Yeah. But generally, we needed to see each other go through life. My old church used to say, yeah, you do fellowship with people. We fellowship in groups, and that's how you get to know people. And it is true.
Right.
But we're getting ready to, this is our last time. I still intended this to be the last marriage. I don't get along with the American way in that sense where, okay, try that out. Nope, don't like that car. I'm going to trade it in, 3 years in.
Absolutely.
And nope, I truly believe that marriage is a once in a lifetime thing. It's always been my intention. And I owe that to her, to honor her with that.
Yeah.
Well, listen.
Wait, I want to cut in real quick but I want to point out one more thing.
Do it.
Not only did you guys prepare so much, I think, going into your marriage, I think knowing you, Laila, like you also have a story written about everything that you've walked through. I mean, you're an amazing author. I want to give you just a second to talk about your book real quick before, we wrap things up, because I think it's important for someone to have a resource. And I know you have a beautiful, beautiful one. So, yeah.
The neat thing is that when you take the time to really look at the mess, the state and condition that you're in, it's healthy. Mm-hmm. People try to tell you like, oh, just move on, just start dating again. And it's really the mentality in society today is kind of, let's turn a blind eye and just keep pushing forward.
Yeah.
But when you keep pushing forward, you don't realize that you're really just dragging all the mess behind you.
That's right.
You're not actually cleaning up anything. You're not addressing anything. You're not making any progress. It's almost like a hamster on a wheel that keeps going around. And just because you're in motion, you think you're moving, but you're
Right.
not actually moving.
Yeah.
So for me personally, just before meeting Dave, I was journaling some of the hurts and the pains that I was going through in my prior marriage as it was starting to all fall apart.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was just, Lord, I didn't realize that it was so much mess inside of my heart. And that really started the journey for me to heal, not just from the first marriage, but also as I was going through counseling, some pastoral counseling at the time, it helped me look at the things in my prior generations.
Right.
Because I was completely oblivious to the fact that, oh, wait, this is actually something that's just been happening in my family.
Yeah.
It's norm. I was so busy saying I won't be like that. I'm in the same exact situation. How did I end up in the place that I was trying to avoid?
Wow.
Almost kind of like where you hear people as kids, right? The teenagers, I'll never be like my mom.
Yeah,
and then they start saying the same things that their mom said. And you're like, how did I get here? What? You're so busy trying to resist being like something, you end up exactly the way you tried not to be. And so the first book that I had written, it was really just me trying to journal with Jesus to get through the pain. And it ended up being 200 something pages later. It's like, wow. Well, now that that's all done and over with, Lord, we got to do something else. So the second book that I ended up writing, which is a devotional journal, at the tail end of working on the first, I started working on the second, and it was just simply, Lord, it can't be all bad.
Yeah.
Like that was a lot of mess in that first one, the marriage and the family and the work stuff and, all these different parts of my life in the memoirs. And Lord, it has to be more to this because you cause it all to work for good. So where's the good part?
Right.
And as I started writing the devotional journal, it just focused on, hey,
The good.
you're loved and God can heal you and he wants to do the work with you. Don't ignore the mess. Work through the mess.
Yeah.
And it's a 30-day devotional journal working through the mess.
Yeah.
Pointed specific topics and scriptures and spaces to just write in so that you can work through the mess because this will only get messy if you don't work on this mess.
You're absolutely
And
right.
for us, it's just been a real testament of we're too big and too grown not to deal with our mess. And people just think like, oh, I'm an adult, so I'm mature. But if you're not dealing with your mess, your age has nothing to do with your maturity level.
Yeah.
And we took the time to do the work, and we're seeing all of the fruit and harvest. Thank the Lord.
Did you say the name of the book?
Oh, sorry. The first one is Undefeated,
Yeah.
Memoirs of the New American Woman. And the second one is Undefeated, Single Again, journal. So
Yes.
Just
And we'll-
Undefeated is just
we'll
gonna be-
attach a
Then they're
link.
going to do a married book. It's going to be called Undefeated, The Couple Wins. It's going to be Undefeated.
we'll see what the Lord would do.
We'll see what the Lord
Are
will
you
do.
okay with us attaching a link so they can find it?
Oh, yeah, the website.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll do that for sure. Absolutely. Because I think it's a great resource. Yeah.
You two, it's been awesome.
Yes.
And I feel like we could have done this for another 2 hours.
I
Literally.
know.
It's not my world, so I'm learning things that I'm like, oh my word. And truly, this conversation will, I think, and I believe this, will truly help me even coach better in an area that I'm not very versed in.
Yeah.
So thank you for today, because it's going to cause me to do some research and learn some things that I didn't know. So I appreciate your honesty, your vulnerability. Is truly a blessing to have you in our home and,
Yes.
and taking the time to do this with us.
Yes.
That being said, thank you for joining us once again as we balanced life through blended families. We look forward to seeing you.
Once again, we want to say thank you for tuning into this week's episode. Our true desire is this has brought value to you, your marriage, and or your family. The fact is, we can't do what we do without the support of you. By your liking, subscribing, and sharing this content, it reaches to those that are beyond our reach. Also, we would encourage you, check out our website, brokenforbetter.com. Become a monthly supporter, because by you supporting us, you too are making a difference in marriages.
We want to stay connected with you. So follow us on all the different social media platforms at Broken for Better, because on those different platforms, we're going to be giving tools, we're going to have events, all the different ways that we can stay connected, and we want to be connected.
One of the terms that we've adopted is if your marriage will visit a fitness center, you too can avoid a trauma center. We truly believe in marriage coaching. It doesn't matter what season of life you're in, whether your marriage is a 10 or whether your marriage is a 1. We offer marriage coaching to take it to another level.
Thank you for joining us.